good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. This is our webinar on sharing and exchange, the land information ecosystem in the Arab region. So before I introduce myself, please be aware that we have simultaneous translation to Arabic. You can see this option at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom screen. You may switch between English. It says there French, but it's in fact into Arabic. So feel free to choose the language you feel most comfortable with. My name is Romy Sato, and I coordinate a network of researchers in Land Portal Foundation. The Land Portal Foundation is a Dutch nonprofit organization that works towards improving access to land-related data and information to all. We provide a global free and open data platform to help make invisible data visible and available to everyone. And for this, we collaborate with a large network of international, regional, and local organizations across the world. I'm here today to facilitate this great webinar about land information ecosystem in the Arab region, which takes place just a few days before the second Arab Land Conference. So if you have not yet registered to this conference, please do so. You will quickly find this information in the internet. This conference will take place between the 22nd and 24th of February in Cairo, but with all sessions also streamed online. But going back to our webinar on land information ecosystem, some of you might be wondering, what is this information ecosystem? So I prepared a few words about it because I know that sometimes this information of this term, ecosystem, land and information ecosystem may not be very clear to everyone. So if you think about the term ecosystem in biology, it refers to a community of living organisms and non-living organisms, things interacting as a system. And with data and information is very much the same. We mean a large group of data and information which interact with each other, or to use the correct term, which operate with each other. But they can only operate with each other if they meet certain requirements. The most important being that they are open. This makes them accessible to everyone and adaptable. And this is very powerful to secure land tenure for people, particularly to vulnerable groups. So the objective of this webinar today is precisely to discuss how land stakeholders in the Arab region can build such a land information ecosystem. And we will learn a little bit more into this now when I said that this can be powerful to secure land tenure. Laura is in a few minutes going to give you a presentation to explore a little bit more these terms. So today we want to explore how can we work in partnership to increase access to information in a way that it's beneficial for all. We also want to identify gaps in land information in the region and how to bridge these gaps. For example, in land administration, but also in terms of information for capacity development and other areas. Finally, we want to explore simple steps that we can all commit to help sharing knowledge in a systematic and open way. If you are interested in this topic as well, I take quickly a few words just to remind you that we will have a master class during the second Arab Land Conference. It will take place next week, next Wednesday, 24th of February at 4:30 in the afternoon in Cairo, local time. Now, let me introduce you to our panelists. And I just start by saying that we had a few changes. One of our panelists, Ombreta Tempra, cannot be here, unfortunately, today. But Evelyn from also from UN Habitat, was kind enough to accept and stepping in for Ombretta. Let me start by introducing Laura Medjolaro, and I will ask my colleagues, please, if they can put up the PowerPoint presentation with some slides where you can see our colleagues there in the slides. I don't know if we can have that, Neil. Anyways, let me start by saying Laura, she's our team leader in the Land Portal Foundation. Laura is a specialist in information and knowledge management for development, with a passion for open data, with more than 15 years of experience in the sector. Laura has a substantial program management experience. During the last 10 years, she has been then leading our team in Land Portal. Our next panelist is Dina Naguib. Dina is an urban planning researcher. Oh, now we were going to have, I see, we are going to have our slides for you, so you can follow a bit easier. So this is Laura. You will see her again shortly. And I introduce you to Dina Naguib now. She is an urban planning researcher in the Housing and Building National Research Center in Cairo. Dina has 18 years of experience as an urban planner, and she's currently a PhD candidate on urban design and community development at Cairo University. Dina has already performed many assignments in providing technical assistance and capacity building in urban planning. Our next panelist, Evelyn, who's stepping in for Ombretta today.
Sorry, can I interrupt you, Romy, just for a few seconds? There are two persons at least asking for guidance about Arabic language, access to Arabic language.
Yes, we see some.
Sorry for interrupting.
Okay. For you, exactly. If you need us assistance, please take a look at the bottom of your screen. It's either at the bottom or at the top of the chat. You will see an option to switch. It says switch to French, but it is indeed Arabic. So you can still click in there. It says French, but when you go to that room, you will hear the Arabic translation. I hope you can find that. Otherwise, I would also ask my colleagues who are supporting me in the background, and you can also type in a message to my colleague Neil or Stacy, and they will be able to help you as well. If you can type in a message to them in the chat, please. Okay, so continuing, we have Evelyn with us today, and Evelyn is a land governance, gender monitoring and evaluation expert. She has over 17 years of experience working with national, regional, and international organizations. And Evelyn currently coordinates the Global Land Indicator Initiative and serves as gender focal point for GLTN at UN Habitat. Our next panelist, Rafik, thanks for intervening to help our participants here. Rafik Kodi maybe is probably very known to most of you or many of you. He is a senior consultant to the Arab Land Initiative. Rafik has a PhD in development economics and large experience with land tenure issues. He was for 15 years in charge of the European and international relations of the Order of French Surveyors. And he is also one of the principal authors of the GLTN book on women and land in the Muslim world. Next, we have, last but not least, we have Raed Garib. He is a co-founder and CEO of Seeds Jordan. It's a youth organization that works to increase youth's active participation in development processes, such as achieving the SDGs. He is a member in the International Land Coalition Council and also a member in ILC Regional Committee for MNM. Riot is a social entrepreneur and holds a PhD in business management. Okay, now I'll tell you a little bit how we will run this webinar. So the webinar is being recorded both in English and Arabic, and they will be available for consultation on the Land Portal website, on our YouTube channel as well. We will start with a short presentation by Laura, and she will tell you a little bit more about open data and its importance for land and social change. After that, I'm going to then have this chat with our panelists. It will be through 3 rounds of questions. And after these 3 rounds of questions to the panelists, we will open for questions and answers by you. We should have at least 30 minutes for that. For posing your questions, please use as much as possible the Q&A feature, which you can also find at the bottom of your Zoom interface, the Zoom screen. You will find the Q&A there. You may also want to pose your questions in the chat, so the other participants can see it. But it's primarily, if you can use the Q&A, it's better for my colleagues who are then going to help me to pick up your questions so we can address them to the panelists. Okay, before we go any further, we would just are curious about yourselves. And I'm going to release now 2 quick polls you will see in your screen, because we are curious to know more about you. Where are you based and which sector do you represent? So I'm going to start. Oh, Neil, please, if you can help me with that, because I see, Neil, that my colleague is the host now of our Zoom meeting. If you can release the first poll, and we can see then where our participants are based. There you go. You should be able to see it. And if you can click in the first question, in which region are you based? We'll give a few seconds for that. And the second question. Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, we are having some, the panelists cannot vote. Okay. Thanks, Neil. Can you please release the results? I think it's possible for everyone to see, Neil. Thank you very much. So we see now that we have a majority coming, or actually there is a draw here, 33% coming from the Near East and North Africa. And also with the same amount of people we have from Europe and Central Asia. So which sector do you represent? We have a large majority of people coming from international organizations with 29%, but we also have some participants from the private sector. Thank you very much. Now, with no further delay, I will pass now the word to Laura.
Thank you, Romy. Thank you for having me here and the great opportunity to make a short intervention. I wanted to stimulate further discussion with my presentation by answering mainly to 2 questions. Why is it important to share data openly in order to improve policy and decision making? And the second question is why data needs to become public good. And I hope answering these questions will stimulate further discussion later. So everybody is aware that and have the perception that we live in a data revolution. So land information is increasingly being created, collected, stored, and shared as data, and new technologies are helping us to capture, to monitor, to analyze land information. But the amount of data has increased exponentially over the last 2 decades. But the question is, can we work with the data and the evidence that we have to improve land governance? Let me use a few slides to aid my presentation. Is Melly to support me explaining this concept? Can you see my slides? Perfect. So we like to refer to this pyramid here, which represents the relationship between data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. So in the context of this pyramid, data represent kind of stimuli, signals that are of no use until they are presented in a usable or relevant form. So data is a type of raw material captured into data sets or tables or satellite sensors that is of no use until it's made open and free from their own data sets and then become information. So to become information, you need to add value to data and meaning. So this, for instance, can be represented by the traditional research analysis or by the fact that you link data together, so combining, for instance, data from different data sets to create more context, more understanding. So from there, to become knowledge, data has to have a concrete application, and action need to be attached to that. So for example, using the data, the information to assess the impact of a certain land project and learning from it and feed back into the project, or using the data to build a story or an infographic which can become a support tool for a particular policy process. So this is the way for information to become knowledge. And from there to become wisdom is more a matter of social, economic, environmental viable conditions as well as individual preferences. So these, I'm not sure I was able to change the slide, move to the next one. Well, let's go here. So this is just an example of, it's an example of an ecosystem in the agriculture sector, where you can see there are different sectors, the private sector, NGOs, and government interacting, overlaying each other, and where people play different roles. Now, there are data collectors, researchers, analyzers, tech developers, product centers, intermediaries. So different people playing different roles within the ecosystem. But let's go more in detail of what are the components of an information ecosystem. We like to compare the ecosystem to a city with a complex system of elements that interact together. Data and information, this is the building block of the ecosystem. This can be compared to cars in a city, allowing information to go from one place to another to reach its destination. Similar to data, they need to reach the right people at the right time to be useful. Then we have people, actors. Each of them have their unique role to play within the ecosystem. So certain types of data that requires highly specialized skills, for instance, to really process, understand, analyze satellite data, we need data scientists or GIS experts, and then they can pass their information to other people who can build on their products, and do not have to necessarily have the same skills. I mean, everybody can bring their own skills and capacities into the mix. Then we have an important element in the ecosystem, the attitude to share, collaborate, learning, provide feedback. So similar to the traffic in a city, no? You need to be considerate about other people, other cars moving. You need to follow the rules for the traffic to be smooth. So, and the collaborative and considerate level of awareness is needed in an information ecosystem. It's very important. So collaboration is necessary across sectors and countries to avoid duplications of efforts, to work more efficiently, but also the right attitude towards learning from the information. What is this information, this data telling us? And also providing feedback. Feedback is absolutely important to improve the quality of the information and the data. So this attitude of sharing knowledge, sharing data, and sharing feedback. And finally, the infrastructure. Similar to cars in a city that needs bridges, they need roads to move from one place to another to reach their destination. Also, data needs its own infrastructure to be able to flow and reach the destination. In the information science, these roads are the standards, the metadata, the data models, all those good practices that pertain to a good data management. So the Land Port has been working hard and in collaboration with many other partners and organizations over the last 10 years to build up a healthy and democratic information ecosystem in the land sector, mainly in three ways: building a culture of information sharing and collaboration, building a better data infrastructure, and capacity in the sector for data management, publishing, and sharing. So building a culture of information sharing and collaboration. Often we hear people saying, I'm afraid that by sharing data is not safe because, or for instance, my data is put out of context, or I don't know how people will use my data, or for instance, I lose the control over my data, or things like the number of visits to website will decrease and so on. So because of this way of thinking, very often data it stays close in silos, is shared across a small number of people and organizations. Publications do not get the right visibility, is invisible, they're not used, very unlikely to generate any impact. Of course, we understand that some data can be misused. Data privacy is a value that we have a strong attention to, but open data is not about personal data. And there is an incredible value that can derive from sharing data openly, such as transparency, increasing transparency and accountability, but also improving monitoring, avoiding duplication of efforts, increasing efficiency, and ultimately getting better results, which is what everybody is looking for. The second point, building an infrastructure. Does a good infrastructure exist in the land sector? Well, there is a lot to work to improve and overcome certain important gaps. And for that, we've been building tools and services for data sharing and building capacity. We encourage people thinking, do I usually create metadata when I publish my publication or my data? Do I consider the license? If you do not put a license, automatically your publication is copyright. Nobody can use it. Or do I use, publish the data with the right format? Well, think that, for instance, publishing a data table into a PDF, right? Nobody can use it. But if you publish your data table as a CSV or an Excel, then somebody else can pick up and do something with it. So just consider these few elements is very important. So when data is legally open with the right license and technically open, then we have a functional ecosystem, and data becomes public good. Data has to be public good. So the first step to improve the ecosystem is mapping it. Mapping the ecosystem is about identifying who is doing what are the main gaps, what are the opportunities or the challenges to address data accessibilities. Is there any opportunity for collaboration and linking the dots? So mapping the ecosystem help us visualizing it like in a map and understanding it, and also understand how data is published, accessed, and shared. So just to conclude, we all play different roles within this ecosystem, and now land rights are at the point of global attention because of the SDGs. There is a lot of initiatives collecting and monitoring land data. So it's a unique opportunity to use this momentum around land issues to collaborate and make information and data more open and accessible to all, get more coordinated and work more effectively together. So this is just a pledge to work together, and we can help you making this more coordinated and structured to improve the information ecosystem in the Arab region for everybody to work for a better land governance. Thank you, Romy. Back to you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. Very interesting. I think it sets very well the stage for us to continue this conversation on open data, having in mind it's not about privacy, interfering with privacy, having in mind, of course, the concerns that open data is not going to affect and actually cause negative impacts on vulnerable groups, at least that's the idea. And I just wanted to remind everyone again to please feel free to, at any point, to pose your questions, preferably in the Q&A, but you can also post it here in the chat. Well, now we go to our round of questions, and I would like to start by asking a question to Dina. So Dina, in your research, but also in conducting training, that's also an area that you have a lot of experience, training related to land issues. Where do you see the most critical information gaps?
So if we're talking about capacity development, it acts as a main tool in order to build the missing knowledge and to assist into building the existing knowledge and to transforming it into practical tools. So it aims to identify the missing key aspects and to increase the capacity of different actors. This includes land-related stakeholders, practitioners, local community, in terms of advocacy, for instance. So it also aims to strengthen the land-related institutions and to develop new tools for sustainable good governance. If we are talking today particularly on land governance, we aim to fill the most urgent gaps related to all land functions, and the continuum of land rights reveals a wide range of tenure forms, reflecting the degree of security from a social perspective, of course, according to the customary and the social norms. So there are various challenging facing the governments in the region. So there is an urgent need to integrate the institutional and the legal statutory systems along with the customary systems and the local actors, local authorities, maybe NGOs, and the users as well, or the beneficiaries. So there are parties or actors that can act as mediators in between to lead the discussion on local level, including the community and local actors, in order to consider them in the decision-making process. So there are land-related issues that impact the security of land tenure, equity, and land governance, such as if we are talking about open data. So some of related deficiencies are the lack of participatory decision-making, overlapping claims, and conflicting of interests. Also, the low level of transparency and maybe the growing levels of corruption, or the existing ones as well. Lack of local community participation in the dialogue and identifying their priorities according to their perceptions, and the lack of vision for facing the future challenges in the context of sustainable development. And most of this all, for all governments, the most challenging part is the inability of the current system, the existing one, to deal with the rapid change related to the land access and land use. So if I just want to focus on the most, if you are just wanting to benefit the vulnerable groups, so we have unequal access to land through some discrimination practices based on, of course, on the social context in the region and the environment. So one of them is the gender discrimination for women access to land as a key issue for securing their tenure, security, and for their economic development. And of course, the empowerment will impact as a key, main key issue that guarantees achieving an inclusive economic growth and sustainable development.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you very much. And maybe Rafik can now elaborate a little bit also on what you just mentioned, this lack of vision, the inability to deal with so ongoing changes and so rapid changes in the land systems. My question to Rafik is actually on promoting more open data, more access to information. What are the particular complexities of the Arab context which one should consider? Rafik, you are mute, so.
Sorry about that. I think that we have in the Arab world several problems with the geographic information. First of all, we have a tradition of mapping being being done or produced exclusively by military. So we have a problem there. It has become a tradition that the state has the monopoly of creating maps. And we have also a big centralization, largely centralized systems, which do not allow people, citizens or NGOs or whoever would like to work to do part of the job in terms of mapping. And we know that today, of course, everybody can make some mapping with devices that can be acquired at a reasonable price. So I think that this tradition of centralism and also of secrecy, because of course the Arab world is also confronted to security problems that everybody hears about here and there, creates a special atmosphere which is not favorable to setting up a whole system of geographic information in the area. On the other hand, it is well known, unfortunately, that the research departments in the Arab world does not spend much money on or much investment in terms of research and development. So also this is also part of the component, well, an important component to understand what is going on and what is not going on in our area. So my understanding or my conclusion from that is that we have to build capacities. Of course, building capacity is a fundamental issue, but we also have to build confidence. Mm-hmm. And to build confidence is a matter that requires that all the people who know how to deal with these issues of mapping get together, try to build a kind of club, association, call it whatever you want, to try to coordinate, discuss technicalities, identify the limits of this category, the other category. So All actors should meet in a certain point.
Thank you,
Private,
Rafik.
public, NGOs.
Great, thank you, Rafik. I think this is also a good point to bridge to my next question to Raed, which is also along the ways of what do you see, Raed, in your experience working with the youth? Rafik just mentions now we have to build capacity, but we also have to build confidence. And that there's not much investment now in research and development. How does that affect the young people that you work with and in their capacity to use information for securing land rights?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for giving me opportunity to share you this very nice and very important meeting. And I want to speak in Arabic because there's a lot of people here in Arabic and we are talking about Arab region. So بداية
Right, we would just have a small issue here because unless I have some of my colleagues here supporting me, but the problem, unfortunately, I don't understand Arabic. We don't have the translation from English into Arabic.
Okay.
We have English to Arabic, but not Arabic to English. I would please ask you to stick, if you can, to English.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you know, I just want to follow Dr. Rafik about what he mentioned. And I want to say from youth perspective that the issue is like the issue in the Arab world in general and in Jordan, maybe because I'm from Jordan, I can speak about it. It's like mosaic, you know, it's a big mosaic through away. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of experience, but actually we need spend a lot of effort to gathering and collecting and to see the big image of the big frame. Maybe I can share my experience with when we start looking to collect information about strategy, because we said we want to build a strategy for land use in Jordan. We found everyone here have a lot of information, but at the same time they are sitting like an island. We have separate islands. Everyone have his own information, all his information in a closed box, not allowed to anyone from outside to go there. And we spent like 2 months just to convince them to come and sit in the same table. And as Rafik said, many people know nothing about land, but it's know nothing because there's a lot of information, but he can't reach this information. I'm not going to add more than what Rafik said. There's several different type of use for land in Jordan, but yes, recently, yeah, maybe if I have time.
Please, you have see another example. Okay. Yeah, please.
Okay. Another example. Just 3 weeks ago, the Royal Court decided to support youth to go to the land, to use land for farming, because they said they want to promote food security. And they found there's a stereotype that all land in Jordan belong to the government, but they found no, it's not. Only 40% belong to the government. That's it. Yeah, that's
striking data, striking information about it.
Yeah, lack of information.
Lack of information, yeah.
Yeah.
Very good, right. I think this is also a very good bridge to Evelyn. I want to bring you now here in our round. In terms of, we are talking exactly, Raed gave a good example about lack of information or information that it's not easily accessible, or the conditions do not enable you to access this information. And what do you see, what are the difficulties encountered in accessing information? And why do you think that some institutions, they do not want to share data? How does that affect the governance of tenure in your experience?
Thanks, Romy. I hope you can hear me clearly. Thank you. And hello to participants who've joined this meeting, this webinar. Thanks, Romy, for that question. So in terms of difficulties, and I think Laura's presentation was able to allude to some of the challenge or the difficulties, but also from the other colleagues. So first is about resource constraint, both in terms of technical capacity to be able to collect the correct information. There is financial challenge. Most of the institutions that are mandated to collect data often do not really enjoy the budget requirements from government. And also, even for the international, maybe donors and communities don't necessarily channel a lot of resources for data or
Oh, Evelyn, I think we are losing you a little bit. I don't know if it's due to
so to speak, or information, so to
Evelyn, sorry, if you can hear me well, we are losing you a little bit. I don't know if it's due to the bandwidth.
So in this case, it makes it very institutions to collect data and be able to relay this or... Hello? You can hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me,
yes. We can hear you now, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the resource challenges both in terms of budget, but also this for those institutions that have done very well in collecting data and information, you find also in terms of the level of disaggregation, be it on women rights or be it on indigenous communities' rights, that data is not necessarily available, and it's often taken from a universal point of view in terms of who owns, for example, the land, and even data that is available, you find from an administrative point of view, it's very skewed either to high productive agricultural land or highlands, or versus maybe an urban informal settlement that is not necessarily covered or not necessarily, data is not available on cadastre system, or very limited also data on the survey.
Oh, Evelyn, sorry, we are missing you again.
What community really feel or good being collected.
Okay, now it's good again. Yes, thank you.
I don't know. Sorry for that.
No problem.
Just to highlight a few more points, another aspect is also the political will, which also links directly to the policy environment in which data is capacity for collecting that data and be able to use it and sharing it. Then there are also challenges to do with the different legal and dualism of tenure regimes. For a communal tenure related or a communal land tenure system, most of this land is not necessarily documented. So it's difficult even to know the characteristics and the conditions for which the communities living there are either enjoying those rights and whether they are vulnerable in one way or the other. Then there are serious overlapping institutional mandates when it comes to data and information gathering, where you find, for example, Ministry of Environment collecting data, Ministry of Land collecting data, and so forth. Then there are also questions on data protection issues, which also links to the whole question on the policy related aspects, and also community vulnerabilities, and particularly looking at women and marginalized groups where they have to cover a longer distance to go and maybe access data from, for them to be able to finalize on their transfer of land or to even facilitate, a land transaction, which also makes it very difficult for them to operate. Another point on why this institution don't necessarily want to share, there's the question of secrecy, as Rafik has mentioned, that land, and particularly within the boundaries of a country, is considered a highly territorial secret, both in terms of what minerals, what resources are found there, where are the boundaries and so forth. So any ability to open it up, presents either security threats or opening up to maybe sources or exposure that they may not necessarily be very friendly about. Also having land information and data at times also reignites historical aspects or questions or queries, which some of the governments or institutions may not necessarily be very friendly, or maybe some communities might raise up and say, no, this is not what is historically correct. So there are also fears in that front. Then the data gathering and presentation of at times also is not accessible to most of the communities or most of the community groups, be it women, be it indigenous communities. So data is available. For example, if you are presented with a cadastre map, very few people will be able to interpret what this really means. So in terms of presentation of this information, makes it very difficult for these groups data to be and information to
Great.
be usable.
Evelyn, sorry, I have to cut you here so we can move, and I'm sure there will be also more time to elaborate further on these points. And anyways, I think there is also a very rich amount of information you mentioned, non-political will, the lack of resources in institutions also to collect this data, but you also made several interesting points about accessibility, now that it's not just about being available, but also being accessible. And we are moving now to a second part of questions that will deal exactly with this, whether it's accessible or not. Information might be available but not accessible, or may not even be available. I wanted to also release yet another poll to see the participants now, your vision, your experience about information. How do you see the state of information in the Arab region? Neil, if you can please release the second poll with a question to our participants. And you will see again in your screen the questions with a few options. There you are. So how do you see the state of land information in the Arab region? First option is information is available, accessible, and open. Good, very good scenario. The second is information is available, easy to access, find, but not open for me to reuse it. The third case is information is available, but not easy to access or to find or open. And the fourth situation is there is simply not enough information. No, it's not available, not accessible, not open. We'll give a few minutes for you to respond. A few seconds, sorry, minutes, no. Good. Neil, if you can please, and we will see what is most of your experiences. Wow, a large majority, 80% feels that it's not enough information is available, accessible, or open, followed by information is available, but not easily accessible or open to be reused. Good. Now we go into what steps can we make to bridge these gaps? And Dina, I will ask you now, all panelists, to be quite brief because we are reaching to our limit here in terms of time. So if you can be very short in your next answers. Dina, how can we transform available data into knowledge, into research, for the cases where data is available, now with actors spearheading this initiative? And if you have success stories, precisely that data has become available, has become accessible.
First, I have to agree, unfortunately, to the poll. Of course, there's not enough information, and it's at the end, it's according to the eye of the beholder. Who is seeing the perception of which actor is seeing this information and from which point of view? This is, I think, what Evelyn was trying to say. Even for donors or international organizations, when they offer some fund, how people use this fund and provide the perception from which point of view. Also, what Riyadh was just saying, acting from different or separate organizations as different islands or separate islands. So scientific knowledge is displayed through literature review and some research as models, scenarios, mathematical equations, academic papers that usually are not comprehended with different actors like practitioners or users. So we have this massive knowledge and this information, for example, and we need to understand the context and which it poses and how to shape the future in terms of shaping and developing a vision with this information. So some of the success stories I can mention, I can name one in Dubai. Dubai Land Department recently had incorporation with the real estate, Dubai Real Estate Institution and the Regulatory Authority. Had built a program for disseminating and enhancing the real estate knowledge in the market through a professional and scientific training. Also, the government of Dubai Media Office had announced in May 2020 that they had successfully introduced a new registration system for real estate transactions, which allows the real estate owners to remotely register their properties from abroad. So this is allowed for government-wide smart transformation gaining momentum. This adds to it. So maybe another story from Jordan. The Department of Lands and Surveys has the second highest score in the Land Administration Quality Index for the Middle East and North Africa region in the business report issued in 2020 by the World Bank. And this is a kind of paradox, because Riyadh on the local level or in an active actor doesn't feel the same way as what has been displayed or what has been measured through this index. So this is kind of paradox that we have to highlight on the difference between what's in the research or in the indexes and in the measurements and what people are feeling on ground. Also, Oman, they have this 2040 strategy that integrates research in the general innovation planning system and developing a capacity development plan to strengthen the capacity of governmental staff, in addition to preparing training sessions for the inventors and licensing, and providing incentives to the private technical service providers.
Dina, thank you. I will have to cut you here. Sorry for that. But just so we can also allow some other participants, maybe they can also join us giving some of these examples, Rafik. That can you also share, how can we ensure that information that is already available is accessed and used? Nan, if you also have some examples to share with us.
No, I don't really have any examples, but I have some recommendations and I have some proposals to make. I think that following what I have said a few minutes before, I think that people coming from different specialties and different professions have to meet. The people who work on data, on geographic information should work. I think that they should do what has been done in more than 20 European countries, that is a national association of people working on geographic information. This is something that is very important, that it can be the place where people would exchange experiences, identify their capacities, their limits, both technical and economic and political as well, etc. So that the internal debate takes place and that the different actors and stakeholders discuss together. I think this is something fundamental, that is something that exists all over Europe, in all European countries. I don't understand why in the Arab countries we don't have such experiences and such associations. We have tried once to launch the idea in one country, but it has appeared to be very problematic to have an association on anything. So I mean, this is a big problem, a big democratic problem. But it is also a problem related to the essence of development of capacity, the capacity development, and the fact that the utmost necessity to get all the stakeholders to work and coordinate together to try to upgrade the whole situation in the country. This is my idea. Another maybe last idea is that the Arab countries, except for Morocco, which is doing a very interesting job and very particular in the Arab world, except for all the other countries are not present in the international forums, or very weakly present in the international forum, and this is something that I really regret. Yeah,
in that, and I think that's a good point, Rafik. I will turn now actually to Riot, and then I can close also with Evelyn on this part of the panel. Riot, when some of the ideas, suggestions that Rafik was mentioning, do you see that the youth can be better prepared to maybe take forward some of these suggestions?
Yeah, but first give me just opportunity to make a short comment about what Dina said. Yes, Department of Land and Survey, they are doing a good job, but in their own island. You know, if I look to the big frame, I will say there's maybe 4 or 5 land use strategy in Jordan, For example, if I go to the Minister of Agriculture, they have their own strategy. I went to the Land Survey Department of Land and Survey. They have their own. The same in the Aqaba private zone. So we don't have one strategy for land use. This is the point. I want to go to your question. All of us agree that the future of development in Arab world has a base. If they want to go to very far in the future, they have to base on youth. They have to, because they are the source of future. They are the source of development. Youth never ever be a load on development. Always they are the main source for the development. Always I said, if I what we the challenge for youth, what's the problem for youth to go forward? I said they have to empower them. When I say empower them in general, and I can go deeper, empower them in technology, empower them about knowledge, empower them about how to handle with nature, with everything. So in this situation, we say we are going to reach very sustained development, very strong countries. If we said yes, the youth, they can change. I remember when we started going to the land, we said we have to start with refugees who are coming from Syria, and we most of our youth, they don't have any experience with this issue. So we reach many places, as I mentioned in the beginning, and then directly we established our own non-formal refugee camp at north of Jordan. Now we are handling with 2,050 person in this refugee camp. And I think the youth are doing a great job, because they transfer the knowledge from being as only refugees to be as an expert. They move the experience and knowledge from Syria to Jordan. The shape of farming totally different when the refugees starting work as a farmer.
So knowledge is traveling.
Always, I go back to knowledge and empowering youth.
Yes.
Always we have to focus in this point.
Thank you. Right. And I would like now to exactly address this to Evelyn in terms of, are there opportunities for regional partners to cooperate in building this information ecosystem in the Arab context? Oh, Evelyn, you are muted.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, there are a lot of opportunities for this collaboration to happen in the Arab region. I think one, we can locate this squarely within the context of the Arab Land Initiative, where UN Habitat, GLTN, and the Arab Land Initiative partners such as BMZ, we have the GIZ, we have NELGA, have been working together really to explore opportunities to strengthen capacity of National Statistical Organization to be able to work directly with the civil society organizations in a way that brings the information closer, brings the capacities closer, and building really the professional connection, the professionalism around data and land data and information to professionals and experts to connect, to be able to learn, to be able to share. And I think this is also a one way of promoting a cross-regional learning and sharing opportunities, which we must be able to take advantage of. And this webinar also locate this kind of an opportunity really to get to know even who is doing what, where are those opportunities, and how can we be able to share. Another opportunity is also to build on existing land data and information infrastructure. It's very difficult, for example, particularly working with government, to introduce new initiative of measures, but we can be able to build on existing data and information infrastructure. We can be able to better those infrastructure in terms of new technologies, promoting maybe new tools that are able to bring this, collect this data and information, and be able to present them in a more accessible way. And we can hinge and hook this or anchor this on the SDG related efforts that we have specific, for example, land indicators and land related targets, which as a region also has its own global responsibility to really, demonstrate its capacity and be able to really showcase what is happening from a land point of view. So the political goodwill is equally very important in terms of, promoting investment on land data and information, and ensuring that there's a robust ecosystem of data and information that supports its own, country level or national level policy decision, and making things really moving. So it is an opportunity that we cannot be able to miss, but we also are urging the government and the practitioners to take lead and ensure that also they get the support from, government and other external partners to make this possible. So yes, there are opportunities we can take advantage of.
Thank you, Evelyn. We now go to the last round, and actually what I would like to do is slightly different maybe from what we had in mind, just because also I'm conscious of the time and to leave enough time for our discussion. I would like to propose very quickly to go on a round that you can tell me, panelists, what is needed. What if you have to tell donors what they need to be supporting? What would you be telling them to support? What can be the best practices that we, as land tenure professionals in this field, could adopt ourselves? If you can give me quickly a few ideas around these two questions. Let me start by Dina, please.
So I think we need different actors beating the drums. So multidisciplinary studies, collaboration between different experts in the region, and the members of different disciplinaries. And I think that we need the strong awareness and raising within the government institutions and the local authorities and advisors as well. Also the inclusion of land practitioners in order to bridge the gaps between the research and the practice on ground. Also to fill the emerging gaps regarding the land systems in the region, the statutory ones, and supporting the decision making by participating more actors in the dialogue, and pushing more investments in the experimental research and evaluation of the existing already initiatives and developed programs, to measure and monitor the progress of these programs, and to guarantee the foreseen sustainability. So I think that it's a self-transformation beginning with a systematic attempt to overcome the limitations of the present knowledge base, and to perceive as unable to address the crucial issues in the region.
Thank you, Dina. Rafik, over to you. What would be your pitch to donors?
My suggestion would be to start relatively small, and to give interest to secondary cities, for instance. When donors come, they usually support the capital. They usually the central government, but all the small or the mid-sized cities also need geographic information. They need to strengthen their municipalities, and they need to have specific tools for them. I think that launching some kind of pilot experiences with crowd mapping, for instance, allowing training people to work to produce their own maps for a small city or for a neighborhood in a mid-sized city, would be something very interesting and very interesting. Well, we could draw a lot of lessons out of such an experience, and including showing that it is not something that is a danger for the security of the country. So I mean,
great. Thank you very much, Rafik. Red, over to you. Red, you are muted. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you for your question, because it's very important for me now, because right now we have a very important mission for SEEDS, because we invited all stakeholders who are working on land and they have honest land strategy, to sit together and publish one land strategy in Jordan. And I think we are doing a very good job. because we invited, for example, Department of Land Survey, Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Environment, Minister of everywhere who have a strategy. We have one committee. They are working in one strategy for land use in Jordan. So I think donors, they will find a very good place to invest, if I call it as invest in this information to go forward again.
And that this information will be now available, published later on.
Exactly.
Great.
We will launch this strategy in GLF.
Great.
Yeah.
At the Global Land Forum upcoming.
Exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right. Evelyn, over to you, please. What could be the best practice we can adopt? And please.
Yes. Yeah, so I think first of all is to appreciate that the Arab region has really major potential. It has the people, it has the expertise, and it has opportunities to really mobilize its resources as a region, technically and financially, to be able to really, do or promote locally led initiative or regional led initiative. And this can be led by partners, by the different institutions, be it the civil society, be it government institution or the private sector in the region, and partners, the academia, the researcher. So what I would pitch with the donors and asking them to do is less foster, less promote locally led or regionally led initiatives that really enhance their capacity, that be able to profile those capacities, that strengthen those capacities in terms of data and information. And some of these examples, maybe one of the core example that, as I mentioned earlier, is the Arab Land Initiative that GLTN and the Arab Land partners have been working on, which has been able to bring these opportunities to, in terms of capacity for national institutions. It's been also able to work on research opportunities for young people, even investing in land and building their capacity to be able to really, profile what are the emerging issues and be able to own those challenges as a region. And I think, I believe there are a lot of strength and opportunities, only that we've not had maybe opportunities to profile them more. And I think those of us who've been in these spaces on working on land governance globally, we may not have seen really the beauty and the strength of the Arab region the way we need to see it, and maybe be able to know where those gaps are. So importantly is that the opportunity we have to invest and have data and information from the Arab region cannot be an external agenda. It cannot be delivered by external experts. We have to really get it done and led by the internal or regional partners and institutions and individual experts who are brought together to be able to marshal this and be able to deliver this package. In terms of also resources, I think donors can be able to put in resources and dedicate those in terms of presenting that opportunities, but also connecting this region, the Arab region, with other regions where there's been also a lot of experiences. There'll be cross-fertilization and sharing of knowledge and information.
Great.
Over.
Thank you, Evelyn. A very rich menu for donors. Laura, I would like to also just quickly go over to you to also give your recommendations for us as land experts or practitioners in this field. What could be your recommendations for us to help building this infrastructure, this information infrastructure?
I think many of the panelists have already pointed this out greatly, and what it comes out very loudly here from all of you is that we really need to collaborate more between, yes, international experts and local experts. Why not? And across regions to learn from each other, to share best practices, to improve the capacity of who is already doing a good job, but maybe is not aware of the latest tools and services and can take advantage of those to improve dramatically the work that they're already doing. Just to break those barriers, those boxes, not that Raed was referring to many times, the islands that do not work. I mean, we cannot work in this way if we keep each of us in an island. We really need to break those barriers and let information flow. As Evelyn pointed out, the main custodians of data is government, and I think is widely recognized now that there is a capacity gap there in governments. They need to understand, first of all, they need to understand that opening land is not a threat, but is an opportunity. growth, for economic development, and also to improve development, to have all the sectors in their own countries growing and developing. But civil society has a strong role to play too. So working together, collaboration, I would say. Thank you, Romy.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. And exactly now, coming out of our islands here of panelists, moderations, and the support team, I want to start with our Q&A, questions and answers. If you are leaving right now, please do fill out our survey to let us know how are you enjoying this webinar so far. My colleagues are going to post this link to a quick survey in the chat here. For those of you still staying with us, I'm going to start with the first question, and that is about the role of artificial intelligence. So what is the role of artificial intelligence in the process of data, and how to apply on what is known as smart agriculture? So if, and the person is asking whether your organizations, other players, can play a role in filling this gap between the North and South countries and bringing this to the Arab countries. Does anyone feel like responding to this question of artificial intelligence? They have some experience with that. I'm looking a bit into Laura, Rafik, or Dina.
Well, I think I'm not an expert in artificial intelligence, but I know that has been started to be explored in most of in the Western countries. But what I want to stress here is that we need to start from the foundations, right? So the information need to be there first, available and open. Otherwise, you cannot use, even with artificial intelligence or similar sophisticated tools, it's not really possible to use to make any applications or any use if the information is not openly available. So yeah, it's being used more and more for applications that can also be useful, can be useful. Why not in the land sector as well? But if the data is not open,
yeah, cannot use it. Rafik, do you also want to respond to that?
Yes, I would like to say first of all that 90% of the agricultural plots are less than are small size, probably less than 1 hectare in the Arab area. So I mean, you cannot invest in artificial intelligence for such a small properties or holdings. Maybe for the big ones, which are the property of well, capitalistic owners, etc. Maybe, I don't know, but they probably know better what to do. However, concerning the small holdings, I think it is not really an issue for the time being, because they don't have the means to invest in such tools.
Okay, thank you. Right, would you like to also respond to that?
Yes, always I said I believe in youth. So just empower youth and give opportunity to just to show what they have. You know, always I said who could produce a lot of games by mobile, he can transfer the knowledge to be like intelligent things. I don't know how to kind of call it, but they can do more than what we expect. Always, youth have a step ahead more than us.
Great, thank you. I have a next question here. Maybe we can also, I'd like to point that to Dina. So do you think that access can also include training the public on how to understand and use data? And in that case, how that can be achievable? Now, if the public doesn't have the capability of using data, open data, then its accessibility of being a public good is questionable. I think both Dina and maybe Laura can also answer these questions. Dina, please.
Yes, so it's not only about one direction approach. So awareness is is one direction from the one who provides the information for the public or for the whoever the beneficial part. But it's also the other way around. The dialogue. Dialogue is very important. Dialogue is intended to bring the hidden glimpses and unquestioned assumptions, and to unfold them into the methodologies on which the analysis should focus on. So it's both linked to each other. We need to work on both directions, and not only advocacy, not only awareness, to make sure. So if we see or we measure analyze the attributes of the people who are the users at the end or the owners of the lands, so you find that there are some built on what information they already have, the pre-existing information. They maybe have mistaken information already there, and there is the herd following everybody. So we need to leverage their understanding by the awareness, and also include their the questions and their the way of thinking and how their perceptions in through dialogue in order to maintain the momentum of decision making and in this process. So what I mean is we have to use those multiple approaches together.
Great,
I fully agree. I
Please.
fully agree with Dina, if I may, Romy, that
Yes.
the information sharing is not a one-way exercise, but I was referring early to feedback and learning. And also in this kind of an ecosystem, there are different people with different roles. So who is producing information need to have in mind who is the target of these information. So for instance, language can become a big barrier if I create information in English for people that do not speak English. So translating a piece of information can be crucial if I want to channel a certain message to a certain group of stakeholders. And translating a complex database with rows and columns into a story that people can understand has the same value in channeling the message. But this can happen in a two-way conversation, as Dina pointed out.
Thank you, Laura. I have an interesting question here. I would like to point that to Evelyn. So it's Mulba. He's from the land governance specialist in USAID in Liberia. And he's asking, can any of the speakers share their experience in how the availability of data has contributed to countering corruption? Or how can lack of data has led to massive corruption in the land sector? Evelyn, I don't know if you have any experience to share that, or also Rafik.
Yeah, thank you. I may not want to mention maybe specific cases per se because of reason for, not ability to authenticate some of the information. But I would want to put it this way, that lack of data or in land information really makes the system susceptible to corruption and manipulation. There are serious cases, and maybe I can quote a number of local, maybe I'm Kenyan. So in our Kenyan context, we have what we call the Ndungu Land Report. And in this report, there were serious allegations of massive land, taken from communities, land that was taken from minority or marginalized communities, that it was grabbed by, powerful individuals and even religious institutions. So if we are able to really trace this land back, it means we have the ability to take it back also and, use it for public good, and maybe give it to, share it out with the communities that really need this land. We've also had initiative, for example, by a number of government institutions, not just in Kenya, but also other countries, to be able to formalize.
Oh, Evelyn, you were suddenly muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry for that. So if you take an example also of Kenya in our land registries, the government here through the Ministry of Land has done very well to digitize the land information system and the registries, so to speak. This has made it so easy for somebody to make a search in terms of the land they want to purchase, whether it's owned by someone else, the history behind it. And that has reduced significantly, not just on the cost, but people playing around with the hard copies of data and files, which most of them even disappear. And not just in terms of land information within the registries and maybe other institutions, but also in terms of access to justice. In our courts, we have cases that have been there for over 50 years or even 37 years. And so, a person who is putting in, or a woman from a rural community, and somebody who is poor and maybe vulnerable for whatever reasons, they are not able to pursue justice because they lack the ability to be able to retrieve this information at a good time to really push for their case and seek justice. So corruption really, it doesn't necessarily operate within the land institution, but also for justice institution and other institutions that are important for them to be able to access this information. So yes, there's a strong correlation between access to land data and information and corruption and transparency related question, and how this really promotes accountability and security of tenure for all, including whoever really needs justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. And I hope also it was well answered. Rafik, I don't know if you want to add any words to that.
Yes, just a few words. I think that the complexity and opacity are favorable to corruption. The more we have opacity and complexity, the more we will have corruption. If through mapping we have more transparency in the mapping and in the processes, etc., then we will have less corruption. Nobody can ever dream of having no corruption at all. Maybe in Sweden or in Nordic countries, but not in the Arab countries, I guess, unfortunately. But at least not for the time being. But I mean, the trend should be based upon transparency and simplification as much as possible.
Thank you. Laura, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind that we hold a very interesting webinar a few weeks ago on how open data can help counteract corruption in the land sector, which indeed it looks one of the most corrupted sectors, and increase transparency. Well, our colleagues from Transparency International, they have a corruption barometer that measure corruption perception index that measure corruption, how people perceived corruption in their own countries. They've been measuring since 1995. At the same time, as organizations in the land sector have started to talk about corruptions very recently. I mean, this is a recent kind of discussions. So I'm expecting a lot of debates and evolution in this area. GIZ is doing a fantastic job about land corruption and the relationship between opening information and reducing corruption.
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to take a last question here. I would like maybe Brian and Dina to respond to that. It is normally maybe a question to Laura, but I would love to see their views. And that's on how do you think that we can avoid that these data ecosystems from transferring decision-making into being a quantitative database, so that people become simply simple statistics? How can we avoid that this whole support into this data ecosystem is not just equating with people with mere statistics, but taking, I think, other factors, qualitative, their context? Maybe Dina and then Riot.
Yes. So I think data gathering should include information of non-scientists in addition to the scientific knowledge as well. So what we just mentioned about the perception of people, the civil society, needing to well prepare a communication to address the needs of the knowledge of the land users themselves. So the governments reflect on their priorities on national levels, and these priorities are reflecting the most pressuring gaps that impacts the performance on the local level. So we need to enhance the whole administrative management system to adopt a bottom-up approach to map these gaps on the local level. And it's very important to map the active key actors that would exert the effort to obtain the change for collaborating by their participation in the discussion and dialogue, and also acting as mediators, I mean. So just like Laura mentioned about the language, we need to unify the language between the government and the local level. So there are some actors that can do that, from NGOs, from the civil society, to unify the language between them.
Thank you, Dina. Right, do you agree? You are muted, right?
I'm totally agree with Dina, because she mentioned the pillar of in data ecosystem. So just let the data be accessible and interact between each other, and then we will be sure that this info and this data always correct.
Thank you. Right. Dear panelists, I would like to just go quickly for a round. If you have any last remarks, we are coming to the end of this webinar. And I will go quickly if you have any key messages before we leave. We go with Laura.
Thank you, Romy. Well, my just last statement is, while we recognize that there is an enormous amount of information out there, their visibility, accessibility, consistency, and completeness is so different from country to country. So let's join actions to make information more accessible. If you have a database, if you have a repository of documents, if you have any story related to land issue and you want to share it widely, please come to us, work with us to improve this ecosystem in the Arab region. Thank you so much.
Evelyn.
Yeah, thank you very much to you, Romy, and colleagues. I think in terms of my conclusion is to indicate that it is possible to be able to collect data and land information that is useful for policy decision. The role of the government and the government institution has to sit at the center of all this, and the other partners provide the support, both in terms of capacity, in terms of the research, in terms of really demonstrating the leadership required for it to be able to do this and be able to really use that information to transform land administration and management for security of tenure rights for all. From UN Habitat and GLTN side, through and working closely with our Arab Land Initiative partners, and the conference that is coming up next week, I think is another opportunity to continue this conversation and explore ways we can remain connected, we can be able to map and build new relationships and networks for which we can be able to advance this conversation. Otherwise, I'm very pleased to have interacted with you as colleagues, as well as those who've listened to us from around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Rafiq, over to you.
I would like, first of all, to thank Land Portal for this initiative and this webinar. It has been a unique opportunity to discuss these issues of importance to all of us. And I think, well, I hope we'll have other opportunities to discuss such issues, and whenever possible to translate that into facts on the ground, if possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rafiq. Dina, over to you.
I want to extend my thankfulness to the international organizations as Land Portal and others, of course, UN Habitat, GLTN, Arab Land Initiatives, all these organizations supporting the development of the governments in the Arab region. Of course, we need more participation from active governmental bodies. Maybe in the webinars, we don't see a lot of participation of governmental parties. We need to extend the dialogue between the governmental bodies and the local authorities, and maybe the local participants who are now from the region listening to us. So thank you for giving us the floor to explain about that and to highlight more. And thanks for all the highlighting and focusing on the Arab region recently in the past few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Any last few words and recommendations? Right, please. No, you have to unmute it. To unmute now, yeah.
Yeah, just I want to say thank you for Land Portal and GLTN, because always I feel they are focusing on data, and I love this attitude. And actually, I will go back to seats members. I will tell them we did a good participation in this super event, and I will say also thank for International Land Coalition, because they are supporting us to make steps toward transparency and accessible information in terms of land issues in Jordan. Thanks.
Thank you very much, all the attendees as well. Stay tuned for more webinars to come in Land Portal. We have the masterclass next week. Thank you to our panelists very much for your time, sharing this information with us. And if you want to share again this any information you may have, come to us, contact us in Land Portal or any of our colleagues here. Thank you, and I wish you all nice afternoon, nice evening, wherever you are. Bye-bye.